I'm Janie Wilson, 29, and last Easter I watched my mother announce to our entire family that I was generously donating my $50,000 wedding fund to my pregnant sister Myra. Except I never agreed to this. The money was from my grandparents, specifically for my wedding with Michael. My parents had already transferred the funds to Myra's account without my knowledge. After years of being the family doormat, something in me finally snapped. This time, I wasn't backing down. I was taking them to court. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop a comment below, hit subscribe, and stick around to hear how I finally stood up for myself after a lifetime of giving in. Growing up in Portland, I was always the responsible one. My parents, Linda and Robert Wilson, raised my sister Myra and me in a comfortable middle-class neighborhood with good schools and weekend barbecues. On the surface, we were the picture-perfect American family. But beneath that carefully maintained image lay an uncomfortable truth. My parents played favorites, and I was never the favorite. My grandparents, my father's parents, were different. They adored me. When I was 16, they set aside $50,000 specifically for my future wedding. "You're so level-headed, Janie," my grandmother would say. "We want to make sure you have a beautiful day when you find the right person." They put it in writing, created a special account, and named me as the beneficiary. They passed away within a year of each other when I was in college. Grandpa from heart failure, Grandma from what seemed like a broken heart 6 months later. The fund became more than money to me. It represented their love, their faith in me, and the future they wanted me to have. My parents became the trustees after their death, but the conditions were clear. The money was for my wedding, whenever that might be. From childhood, the pattern was established. If we both wanted the front seat, Myra got it. If there was one cookie left, it went to Myra. When I earned straight A's, I received a pat on the back. When Myra managed to pass with C's, she got a shopping spree. "Your sister needs more encouragement," Mom would explain. "You're already so good at everything." I remember my 16th birthday. I'd been hoping for a small party with friends, perhaps at the local skating rink. Instead, my parents said they couldn't afford it that year. 2 months later, they threw Myra a lavish 13th birthday at an expensive restaurant, complete with personalized party favors and a DJ. When I questioned the disparity, Dad said, "You're mature enough to understand that your sister needs this boost of confidence." And I did understand. I became the perpetual understander, the one who stepped aside, who didn't make waves. I became increasingly self-sufficient, working part-time jobs through high school and college, never asking for extras. I put myself through nursing school with scholarships and graduated with honors. My graduation party was a small dinner at home. Myra dropped out of community college after 1 semester, and my parents bought her a car to cheer her up. This wasn't just my perception. My best friend Rachel saw it clearly from the outside. "Your parents treat you like the third parent, not like their daughter," she observed during our sophomore year of college. Even extended family noticed. My Aunt Susan once confronted my mother about it at a family reunion, which resulted in a chilly relationship between the sisters for months afterward. Myra grew into exactly the person you might expect. Beautiful, charming when she wanted something, perpetually in some kind of crisis that required financial bailout. She cycled through jobs and boyfriends with equal speed, living in an apartment our parents subsidized. Meanwhile, I became a pediatric nurse, saved carefully, and built a life of stability and quiet accomplishment. I met Michael 4 years ago in the hospital cafeteria. He's a physical therapist, steady, kind, with a quiet confidence that immediately attracted me. On our first date, I found myself talking more than I usually did, sharing thoughts I normally kept to myself. He listened with genuine interest, asked thoughtful questions, and made me laugh in a way that felt like a release valve opening on years of careful self-control. Our relationship developed naturally, without drama or uncertainty. After 2 years, he proposed during a weekend hiking trip, presenting a simple but beautiful ring as we watched the sunrise from our favorite mountain trail. "I don't need anything fancy for the wedding," I told him that morning. "Just you and a day that feels like us." Still, I was excited about planning a meaningful celebration. The Grandparents Fund would allow us to have a lovely ceremony and reception without going into debt. We talked about a garden wedding, perhaps at a historic property near the city, with good food and music for about 100 guests. Nothing extravagant, but something special. Throughout our engagement, I kept hoping that this milestone might finally earn my parents' wholehearted approval. Maybe planning the wedding would bring Mom and me closer. Maybe Dad would finally show the pride I'd always worked for. Despite everything, I still craved their validation, still wanted to believe we could be the family I'd always wished for. Michael noticed my anxiety whenever we discussed wedding plans with my parents. "You don't need to please them," he'd remind me gently. "This is our day." But years of patterns aren't easily broken. I kept trying to involve them, kept hoping for enthusiasm that never materialized. Mom would make vague comments about waiting a bit longer, or wondering if we were sure about our venue choices. Dad would change the subject to Myra's latest job prospect or relationship drama. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. But I didn't want to see them. I wanted to believe that this one time, just this once, they would put me first. Easter Sunday started like any other family gathering. Michael and I arrived at my parents' suburban home carrying a homemade strawberry cheesecake and a potted lily. The house was already bustling with extended family. My father's brother Uncle Jim and his wife Aunt Carol, my mother's sister Aunt Susan and her husband Uncle Dave, and various cousins. Myra arrived last, as usual, with her boyfriend Troy, a tall guy with a sleeve of tattoos who she'd been dating for about 8 months. Mom had outdone herself with decorations, pastel streamers, an elaborate centerpiece on the dining table, and handmade name cards at each place setting. The house smelled of roasting lamb and fresh rolls. Everyone circulated through the living room with drinks and appetizers, catching up on family news and commenting on the unseasonably warm spring we were having. I noticed Mom seemed particularly animated, touching Myra's arm frequently and exchanging meaningful glances with Dad. Myra herself had a smug, secretive smile that immediately put me on edge. I'd seen that expression too many times, usually before some announcement that would redirect all family attention her way. Still, I pushed the feeling aside. Michael and I had just finalized our wedding venue the previous week, and I was excited to share the news with everyone. Dinner progressed normally. Uncle Jim told his usual fishing stories. Aunt Susan asked about my nursing job. Cousin Patrick talked about his new promotion. As dessert was being served, I was about to mention our wedding plans when my mother clinked her glass with a spoon. "Everyone, we have a wonderful announcement," she said, her voice high with excitement. She looked at Myra, who held up her left hand to display a sparkling engagement ring. "Troy proposed last night," Myra gushed, and I said yes. The table erupted in congratulations. Troy looked uncomfortable but pleased as everyone asked about proposal details. Then Myra added, "And we have even bigger news. I'm pregnant." 10 weeks along. Another round of excited exclamations followed. I felt Michael's hand find mine under the table as my mother stood up again, her expression solemn but pleased. "And now, I want to share something that makes me so proud," she said, looking directly at me with an expression that chilled me. As a symbol of family unity, Janie has generously decided to give her wedding fund to Myra and Troy. With a baby on the way and a wedding to plan, they need all the help they can get. The room froze, or maybe that was just my perception as my brain struggled to process what I'd just heard. I hadn't said a word. I hadn't agreed to anything. The fund wasn't even my parents to give away. "That's so selfless," Janie and Carol said, breaking the silence. "Always thinking of others," Uncle Dave added. They were applauding, actually applauding, while I sat there in stunned silence. I felt Michael's grip tighten on my hand as my face burned with humiliation and rage. Janie and Michael are established in their careers, my father added. They've already mentioned wanting a simple wedding. Myra and Troy are just starting out. I looked at my sister, who at least had the grace to appear slightly embarrassed, though the triumph in her eyes was unmistakable. Troy looked confused, as if this was the first he was hearing about it too. I never agreed to this, I finally managed to say, my voice barely audible. Mom's smile tightened. We can discuss the details later, honey. Let's not spoil the celebration. The conversation moved on as if nothing had happened, as if my future hadn't just been casually reallocated at the Easter dinner table. Michael maintained a polite facade, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. I couldn't eat another bite, pushing my dessert around the plate until it was acceptable to start clearing the table. As soon as the dishes were done and guests began departing, I cornered my parents in the kitchen. What was that about? I demanded, struggling to keep my voice low. You had no right to make that announcement. That money is for my wedding. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for me. My mother's face took on the patient, martyred expression I knew all too well. Janie, you've always been so selfish. Your sister is pregnant. She's starting a family. And I'm not? I countered. Michael and I are getting married in 4 months. We've already put deposits down based on that fund. You can afford it, my father said dismissively. You both have good jobs. Myra and Troy need this boost to get started. It's what family does. We help each other. By stealing from one child to give to another? Michael asked quietly. It was the first time he'd ever directly confronted my parents. My mother looked offended. We're not stealing anything. We're making a practical family decision. It's not your decision to make, I insisted. That money is legally mine. Grandma and Grandpa left it specifically for my wedding. We've already transferred it to Myra's account, my father said flatly. It's done, Janie. Don't make a scene over money. It's unbecoming. The casual way he said it, it's done, sent a wave of nausea through me. They hadn't just announced it. They'd already taken the money. Without asking me. Without even telling me until they had an audience. How could you do this? I whispered, tears threatening. You've always been the strong one, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Myra needs this more than you do. We left shortly after, the cheery goodbyes a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. In the car, I finally broke down, sobbing with a mixture of hurt, rage, and humiliation. Michael drove in silence for several minutes, one hand steady on my knee. We'll figure this out, he finally said. What they did wasn't just wrong. I think it was illegal. Through my tears, I felt something unfamiliar crystallizing inside me. A hard, clear certainty that this time would be different. This time, I wouldn't just understand and step aside. This time, I would fight back. The day after Easter, I called my parents, hoping against hope that a night's sleep had given them perspective. Maybe they'd realize what they'd done and apologize. Maybe they'd admit they'd overstepped and would make it right. Mom, we need to talk about what happened yesterday, I began when she answered. Oh, Janie, can this wait? I'm just heading out to help Myra look at apartments. Now that they'll need room for the baby, they're thinking about that 2-bedroom in our neighborhood. Of course they were. The hurt was fresh, but I pushed through. No, Mom, it can't wait. You and Dad had no right to give my wedding fund to Myra. That money was left to me by my grandparents specifically for my wedding. Her sigh was audible through the phone. We've been over this. Your sister needs it more right now. You're being selfish. It's not selfish to want what's legally mine, I insisted. Michael and I have already made wedding plans based on that budget. We've paid deposits. Then you'll need to scale back, she said dismissively. Have something smaller. Or postpone until you've saved more. You're being dramatic about this. I tried a different approach. Can we meet tonight with Dad? The 3 of us and Michael? We need to discuss this calmly. After some reluctance, she agreed. That evening, Michael and I sat across from my parents at their dining table, the same spot where I'd been blindsided just a day earlier. "I've brought copies of the trust documents," I said, placing a folder on the table. Grandma and Grandpa were very clear. This money was set aside for my wedding. It's not a general family fund that you can redistribute. My father didn't even open the folder. "We're aware of what the documents say, Janie. But as trustees, we have to consider the spirit of the gift. Your grandparents would want this money to go where it's needed most." "You don't know that," I countered. "They specifically designated it for my wedding. Not for whoever needs it most or family emergencies, for my wedding." "Your sister is starting a family," my mother interjected. "She and Troy need a proper home for the baby. And now they need a wedding too." "That's not my responsibility," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Michael and I have been planning our wedding for months. We've made commitments based on that budget." "You've always been the responsible one," my father said, as if that justified everything. "Myra needs this boost. You'll manage without it. You always do." Michael, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "With all due respect, that's not fair to Janie. She's not responsible for Myra's situation. And this isn't just about money, it's about respect. You made this decision without even consulting Janie, then announced it publicly to force her hand." My mother's face hardened. "We don't need marital advice from you, Michael. This is a family matter." "I am family," he said quietly. "Or I will be in 4 months. And I won't stand by while you treat Janie this way." The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents refused to budge, insisting they had made the right decision for the family as a whole. When I suggested that we split the fund, giving half to Myra and keeping half for our wedding, they rejected the idea outright. "Myra needs all of it," my father insisted. "Her situation is more urgent." As we left, no closer to resolution, my mother called after me. "Think about what you're doing, Janie. Don't create a rift in this family over money." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Over the next week, the situation only escalated. Myra sent a series of text messages that vacillated between gloating and fake gratitude. "Thank you so much for understanding. You're the best big sister ever," followed by "Troy and I found the perfect apartment. It costs a bit more than we planned, but with the wedding fund we can make it work." When I didn't respond, her tone changed. "Mom says you're upset about the money." "Don't be like that. You know I'd do the same for you if the situation was reversed." But she wouldn't. We both knew that. Extended family began taking sides. Aunt Carol called to tell me how disappointed she was in my materialistic attitude. Uncle Jim suggested I take one for the team, like always. Only Aunt Susan reached out in support. "What they're doing isn't right, Janie. You don't have to accept this." Rachel, my best friend since high school who now worked as a paralegal at a law firm, was more direct. "This is theft, Janie. They can't just take your money and give it to your sister, trustees or not. You need to talk to a lawyer." I was hesitant. Taking legal action against my own parents felt extreme, like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Maybe I can still reason with them," I told Rachel. "Maybe if I explain again how important this is." "You've been trying to reason with them your entire life," she pointed out. "Has it ever worked?" She was right, but I had to try one more time. The following Sunday, I went to my parents' house alone. Michael offered to come with me, but I felt I needed to make this final attempt on my own. Mom answered the door with a tight smile. "I hope you've come to your senses," she said by way of greeting. "I've come to try one more time to resolve this," I replied, following her into the living room where Dad sat watching golf. For nearly an hour, I pleaded my case. I explained how Michael and I had planned our wedding around that budget. I reminded them of my grandparents' clear intentions. I even appealed to their sense of fairness. Hadn't Myra always been their priority? Couldn't I have this one thing that was meant for me? My father finally muted the TV and turned to me with an expression of exasperation. "Enough, Janie. The decision is made. Myra needs a fresh start with the baby coming. You're established in your career. You'll manage. This isn't about managing, I said, my voice breaking. It's about what's right. That money was left to me. We're the trustees, my mother said coldly. We decide how it's used. Not according to the trust documents, I countered. You're violating the terms. My father's face darkened. Are you threatening us? Your own parents. I'm asking you to do the right thing, I said. Please. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. The only one making this ugly is you, my mother snapped. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By threatening legal action over money. You've left me no choice, I said quietly. Then make your choice, my father said, standing up. But understand what it means. If you pursue this, don't expect to be welcome in this family. As the door closed behind me, I sat in my car and cried, not just for the money, but for the family I'd always hoped we could be, for the parents I'd spent my life trying to please, who had never seen me clearly, for the little girl who always gave in, always understood, always stepped aside. But that little girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally reached her breaking point. The following Monday, I called Catherine Barnes, an attorney Rachel recommended who specialized in trust disputes. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, with creaking hardwood floors and tall windows that let in dappled light through mature maple trees. Catherine herself was in her 50s, with short silver hair and rectangular glasses that gave her a no-nonsense appearance. Tell me everything, she said after introductions, from the beginning. For nearly 2 hours, I laid out the history, the wedding fund established by my grandparents, my parents' trustee status, the Easter announcement, and my failed attempts at resolution. Catherine took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. You have a strong case, she said finally. Based on what you've told me, your parents have clearly violated their fiduciary duty as trustees. The trust was explicitly established for your wedding, not as a discretionary fund they could reallocate. So what do we do? I asked. First, I'll need copies of all documentation related to the trust. Then we send a formal demand letter. If they don't comply, we file a petition with the probate court to remove them as trustees and compel return of the funds. The process sounded so clinical, so impersonal, legal machinery that would force my own parents to do what basic fairness should have dictated. It felt surreal. How likely are we to succeed? I asked. Based on what you've described, very likely. But Janie, I need to ask, are you prepared for what this means? Legal action against family is never just about winning the case. I thought about my parents' ultimatum, about years of putting their feelings before mine, about the wedding Michael and I had planned and the future we were building. I'm prepared, I said with more certainty than I felt. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine and I assembled our case. The trust documents were explicit. The money was designated for my wedding, with my parents serving as trustees until disbursement. Bank records confirmed the unauthorized transfer to Myra's account. We even had text messages from Myra acknowledging that the money had come from my wedding fund. Meanwhile, the pressure from family intensified. My father called, his voice cold. Your mother is beside herself. Is money really worth destroying this family? Myra left a tearful voicemail. How could you do this to me? I'm pregnant, Janie. I need this for the baby. Don't you care about your own niece or nephew? Aunt Carol sent a group email to extended family, detailing how I was suing my own parents over money while my sister prepares for motherhood. The narrative was taking shape. I was the villain, the selfish one, the money grabber. Only Michael and Rachel stood firmly by my side. Michael absorbed the brunt of my emotional breakdowns, holding me through sleepless nights when doubts crept in. You're doing the right thing, he'd whisper. Stand firm. Rachel helped with practical matters, using her legal background to help organize documents and prepare me for what to expect in court. They're counting on you giving in, like always, she reminded me. They never expected you to actually fight back. The stress took a physical toll. I developed tension headaches and lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. At work, I struggled to focus on my pediatric patients, my mind constantly churning with family drama and legal strategy. I took 2 personal days when the anxiety became overwhelming, spending them in bed staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was money worth this family schism? Should I just give in like always for the sake of peace? But this wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of being secondary, of having my needs and wishes dismissed. It was about standing up and saying, I matter too. Catherine sent the formal demand letter 3 weeks after our first meeting. It outlined the trust violations in clear legal language and demanded return of the funds within 10 business days, or we would file a petition with the court. My parents' response came not through their attorney, but in the form of a family intervention. I arrived home one evening to find my father's car in our driveway. Inside were my parents, Myra, and Troy, sitting stiffly in our living room. We need to end this madness, my father began without preamble. You're tearing this family apart over money. This isn't about money, I replied, remaining standing. It's about respect. About honoring Grandma and Grandpa's wishes. About treating me fairly for once. Myra's eyes welled with tears. I'm going to be a mother, Janie. Don't you want your niece or nephew to have a good start in life? Of course I do, I said. But not at the expense of what was specifically left to me. Not by letting Mom and Dad take something that's legally mine and give it to you, again. We've made an offer, my mother said stiffly. $20,000. You can have that much back for your wedding. Myra keeps $30,000 for the baby and their new place. It was the first concession they'd made, but it wasn't enough. The principle remained the same. They still thought they had the right to reallocate my inheritance according to their preferences. The entire amount needs to be returned, I said firmly. That's non-negotiable. My father stood up, face flushed with anger. Then you leave us no choice but to see you in court. I hope you're proud of yourself, tearing this family apart when your sister needs us most. After they left, Michael held me as I cried. Not in doubt this time, but in grief for what my family could have been, should have been, but never was. The day Catherine filed our petition with the probate court, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. The die was cast. For better or worse, I had chosen to stand up for myself, to say no to the family dynamics that had shaped and diminished me for 29 years. Whatever happened in court, I had already won a personal victory by finding my voice. The date of the hearing arrived with dreamlike swiftness. May 18th, exactly 6 weeks after the Easter dinner that had changed everything. The morning dawned clear and warm, sunlight streaming through our bedroom blinds as if it were any ordinary day. I stood before the mirror, dressed in a navy blue suit I'd bought specifically for court. Conservative, professional, serious. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened a simple pearl necklace, a gift from my grandparents on my college graduation. Michael appeared behind me, his reflection meeting mine. You look strong, he said, straightening his own tie. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel sick. He turned me to face him. You are the strongest person I know, Janie Wilson. And today, everyone else is going to see it too. The county courthouse was an imposing limestone building downtown, with broad steps leading to heavy wooden doors. Catherine met us in the lobby, crisp and confident, in a charcoal pantsuit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Are you ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied. The courtroom itself was smaller than I'd imagined, with dark wood paneling and uncomfortable benches. My parents were already seated on the opposite side, my father in a suit that looked newly purchased, my mother in a conservative dress that screamed respectable trustee. Myra sat beside them, visibly pregnant now at 14 weeks, clinging to Troy's arm. Behind them sat Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, and several cousins, the family faction that had closed ranks around them. On our side sat Rachel, Aunt Susan, and Uncle Dave, and 2 of my closest work friends who had insisted on coming for moral support. The division was stark and visual, A family literally split down the middle. Judge Eleanor Martinez entered, a petite woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. After the formal opening of proceedings, Catherine presented our case first, her voice clear and measured. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of trust violation. The trust established by James and Elizabeth Wilson explicitly designated funds for their granddaughter Janie Wilson's wedding. The trustees, Robert and Linda Wilson, had no discretionary authority to redirect these funds for any other purpose. Yet that is exactly what they did, transferring the entire amount to their younger daughter Myra's account, without the beneficiary's knowledge or consent. She presented the trust documents, bank records, and even photographs of my grandparents, presenting me with a symbolic wedding fund card on my 16th birthday. Then she called me to testify. Taking the stand, I felt a momentary panic as I faced the courtroom, my parents' stony expressions, Myra's tearful glare, the judge's neutral assessment. Catherine guided me through prepared questions about the trust's establishment, my relationship with my grandparents, and the Easter announcement. And did you at any point agree to redirect these funds to your sister? She asked. No, I said firmly. I was informed after the fact, in front of our extended family, that the decision had been made without my input or consent. And what steps did you take before pursuing legal action? I detailed my attempts at resolution, the private conversations, the proposed compromise, the final confrontation. I tried everything I could to resolve this within the family, I concluded. This legal action was a last resort. My parents' attorney, a man named Gregory Phillips with an expensive haircut and cufflinks that probably cost more than my entire outfit, approached for cross-examination. Ms. Wilson, he began, his tone suggesting we were having a casual chat. Would you say your parents have supported you throughout your life? They provided basic necessities, I answered carefully. They put you through college, did they not? I attended college on academic scholarships, I corrected. They provided housing during breaks. His eyebrows lifted slightly. And now you have a successful career as a nurse, correct? Yes. While your sister has struggled financially? Objection, Catherine interjected. Relevance. I'm establishing the family's financial dynamics, Your Honor, Phillips explained smoothly. I'll allow it, Judge Martinez said. Please answer the question, Ms. Wilson. My sister has made different choices, I said carefully. Phillips smiled thinly. And now she's expecting a child and planning a wedding. Wouldn't you agree these create immediate financial needs? My sister's situation doesn't change the fact that this money was specifically designated for my wedding, I replied. So this is about the money for you? Objection. Catherine stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Move on, Mr. Phillips. He tried several more angles, suggesting I was financially secure enough not to need the money, implying I was being selfish during a family member's time of need, even hinting that my grandparents would have wanted to help their pregnant granddaughter. But I held firm, returning always to the central point, the trust's explicit purpose and my parents' violation of their fiduciary duty. When my father took the stand, Phillips painted him as a concerned parent making a difficult but necessary family decision. Why did you decide to redirect these funds? Phillips asked. We were thinking of the family as a whole, my father replied, his voice steady. Janie is established in her career. She and Michael make good money. Myra and Troy are just starting out, with a baby on the way. We felt this was what the family needed most right now. And did you believe you had the authority to make this decision? As trustees, we believed we had some discretion in how the funds were used. We were trying to honor the spirit of my parents' gift, supporting family at important life transitions. During cross-examination, Catherine was relentless. Mr. Wilson, please point to the language in the trust document that gives you discretionary authority over these funds. He couldn't, of course. And did you consult an attorney before redirecting these funds? No, we didn't think that was necessary. This was a family matter. Did you discuss your decision with Janie before announcing it at Easter dinner? We anticipated she would understand the necessity. That's not what I asked. Did you discuss it with her beforehand? No. So you made a unilateral decision to redirect funds from a trust specifically designated for her wedding, without consulting her, the named beneficiary, and without legal advice? My father's face flushed. We were doing what we thought best for the family. Best for which members of the family, Mr. Wilson? The questioning continued, exposing the pattern of favoritism throughout our upbringing. Catherine was careful not to make it seem like I was complaining about childhood slights, but rather establishing a consistent pattern of my parents prioritizing Myra's wants over my needs. My mother's testimony was even more revealing. Under Catherine's questioning, she eventually admitted, Janie has always been the strong one, the one who could handle disappointment. Myra falls apart. So you took from the strong one because you knew she wouldn't fall apart? Catherine clarified. The moment that truly shifted the courtroom atmosphere came when Myra took the stand. Phillips had clearly coached her to appear vulnerable and emotional, the pregnant young mother-to-be just trying to create a stable home. But Catherine's cross-examination revealed inconsistencies in her story. Ms. Wilson, when did you first learn about this wedding fund? Catherine asked. When my parents told me they were giving it to me, Myra replied. And what was your understanding of where this money came from? My grandparents left it for family needs. Were you aware it was specifically designated for your sister's wedding? Myra hesitated, glancing at our parents. I understood it was available for whoever needed it most. Catherine produced Myra's text messages to me. Thank you so much for understanding. You're the best big sister ever. And later, Mom says you're upset about the money. Don't be like that. If you believed this money was rightfully yours to begin with, why thank your sister for understanding? Catherine asked. Doesn't this suggest you knew the money was being redirected from its intended purpose? Myra's composure cracked. It's not fair, she burst out. Janie always gets everything. She's the perfect daughter, the successful one with the perfect fiancé and the perfect life. I'm struggling. I'm going to have a baby. Why can't she just let me have this one thing? The courtroom fell silent. In her emotional outburst, Myra had revealed the truth. She knew the money wasn't meant for her, but felt entitled to it anyway. Judge Martinez, who had been taking notes throughout, removed her reading glasses and addressed my parents directly. Let me be clear about what I'm seeing here, she said. Trustees of a specific trust fund, clearly designated for a particular purpose, unilaterally decided to redirect those funds to another beneficiary entirely. You did this without consulting legal counsel, without the named beneficiary's consent, and apparently without consideration of your fiduciary responsibilities. Is that an accurate summary? My father attempted to explain again about family needs and difficult decisions, but the judge cut him off. Mr. Wilson, the law regarding trusts is not ambiguous. Your role as trustee was to administer the trust according to its terms, not to redirect funds according to your personal assessment of family needs. The trust was explicit. This money was for Janie's wedding, not for family emergencies, not for your discretionary distribution, and certainly not for your other daughter's benefit. She turned to address the entire courtroom. This court finds that Robert and Linda Wilson have violated their fiduciary duty as trustees. The funds in question are to be returned to the trust immediately, and administration of the trust will be transferred to First National Bank's Trust Department until proper disbursement for its intended purpose, Ms. Janie Wilson's wedding. She paused, then added, furthermore, given the clear violation of trust, respondents will be responsible for all legal fees incurred by the petitioner in bringing this action. This court is adjourned. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the suddenly silent room. I sat frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. We had won, completely, unequivocally won. My parents sat rigid with shock and anger. Myra burst into tears, while Troy looked relieved that this ordeal was over. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim quickly surrounded my parents with murmured consolations, while my supporters on our side of the courtroom exchanged relieved glances. As we filed out of the courtroom, Aunt Susan caught up with me. "Your grandparents would be proud of you today," she said quietly. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for standing up for what they wanted." In the courthouse hallway, I caught a glimpse of my parents huddled with their attorney. My mother's face was tight with fury, my father's with disappointment. Myra stood slightly apart, one hand on her stomach, her expression unreadable. For a moment, our eyes met across the crowded hallway. I thought I saw a flicker of something. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps recognition. For the first time, she was seeing me not as the accommodating big sister who always gave way, but as someone who could and would stand her ground. Then Michael's arm was around my shoulders, guiding me toward the sunlight outside, toward our future that now, incredibly, was back on track. The immediate aftermath of the court ruling was both better and worse than I had imagined. Better, because the legal machinery worked swiftly. Within 3 days, the funds were frozen in Myra's account and in the process of being transferred back to the trust, now under the bank's management. Worse, because the family fracture deepened in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My parents didn't call, didn't text. Complete radio silence, as if I had ceased to exist. Myra, surprisingly, sent a single message the day after court: "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond, unsure what to say that wouldn't escalate the situation further. The extended family divided along clear lines. Aunt Carol called to tell me she was deeply disappointed and that I'd chosen money over family. Uncle Jim sent an email saying he hoped I would come to my senses and make this right before it's too late. Several cousins unfriended me on social media. But there were unexpected allies too. Uncle Dave called to say he was proud of me for finally standing up to Bob and Linda's favoritism. 2 cousins from my father's side sent supportive messages, one admitting she'd always seen how differently they treated you and Myra. Most surprising was my mother's brother, Uncle Peter, who had been largely absent from family gatherings for years due to living overseas. He sent a long email that explained a lot. "What you may not know, Janie, is that I distanced myself from your mother years ago for similar reasons. In our family, I was the responsible one, while Linda was the favored child who could do no wrong. Our parents bailed her out repeatedly while expecting me to make my own way. Seeing her replicate that pattern with you and Myra has been painful to watch from afar. You were right to draw a boundary. Some may call it selfish, but sometimes self-preservation is necessary." Wedding planning resumed, now with the certainty of our original budget. But the joy was dampened. Every decision, from flowers to menu choices, carried the weight of the family rift. We removed 16 people from our guest list, all relatives who had actively sided against me. We kept those who had remained neutral or supportive, though I had little hope that my immediate family would attend. "Should we postpone?" I asked Michael one night as we lay in bed, the wedding now just 3 months away. "Maybe give everyone time to cool down?" "Do you want to postpone?" he asked carefully. I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I finally said. "I don't want to put our life on hold because of their choices. I wish it could be different." "I know," he said, pulling me closer. "But remember what you told me when we first talked about getting married? You said you wanted a day that feels like us. Not like your parents' expectations or social obligations, like us." He was right. And increasingly, us was becoming our own family unit, Michael and me, supporting each other, making decisions together, building something new and healthy. Michael's family stepped up in beautiful ways. His mother, Teresa, invited me to lunch and gently asked if she could help with wedding details my mother would typically handle. His sisters included me in their weekly brunch, offering a female support system I badly needed. His father, James, a quiet man of few words, simply said, "You're family now." Family stands together. About a month after the court ruling, I received a call from an unexpected source. Troy, Myra's fiancé. I wanted you to know, he said awkwardly, that I didn't know about where that money came from. Not really. Myra just said her parents were helping us out. When I realized what was happening. He paused. I'm sorry. It wasn't right. Thank you for saying that, I replied, genuinely touched by this olive branch. Myra's struggling, he continued. With the pregnancy, with everything. She's not in a good place. I'm not excusing what happened, just explaining. I appreciate that. Is the baby okay? Yeah, everything's healthy. It's a girl. A niece. Despite everything, the news warmed something in me. I'm glad to hear that. I don't know if things will ever be right between all of you, Troy said, but I wanted you to know not everyone thinks you did the wrong thing. 2 weeks later, the most significant breakthrough came when Aunt Susan called to say she'd confronted my mother directly. I told her she's repeating the patterns from our own childhood, Susan explained. Our mother favored her while I was expected to be the responsible one. I've watched her do the same to you for years, and I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner. How did she take it? I asked. Not well, initially. Defensive, angry. But Linda's never been good at self-reflection. I planted the seed, though. Sometimes that's all you can do. To my shock, 3 days later, my mother called. The conversation was stilted, formal. No apology, no direct acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But she asked if Michael and I would be willing to meet with them to discuss moving forward. I consulted with Michael, with Rachel, even with Catherine about how to approach such a meeting. In the end, we agreed to meet at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant downtown, with clear boundaries established beforehand. No Myra, no recriminations about the court case, just a conversation about whether and how we might begin to rebuild some kind of relationship. The meeting was tense but civil. My father still couldn't quite look me in the eye. My mother did most of the talking, in carefully constructed sentences that skirted direct responsibility while expressing regret for how things unfolded. We want to be part of your wedding, she said finally. We want to be part of your life. I want that too, I admitted. But things need to be different. I can't go back to the way things were. We left with a fragile truce. They would be invited to the wedding, and we would attempt monthly dinners to rebuild some form of relationship. No promises, no expectations, just small steps towards something new. The hardest question remained, Myra. She had not reached out beyond that single text. According to my mother, she felt humiliated and betrayed. She's not ready, my mother said. Give her time. I sent a carefully worded email, opening the door without pressure. I know we have a lot to work through. Whenever you're ready to talk, I'll be here. No response came, but I hadn't really expected one. As June turned to July, wedding preparations accelerated. We found ourselves making choices based on what we truly wanted, not what we thought would please my parents or impress extended family. The venue was changed from a formal garden to a rustic lakeside setting Michael and I both loved. The guest list shrank from 100 to 65, closer friends, supportive family, people who truly celebrated our relationship. It feels more like us now, Michael observed as we finalized the details. Silver lining, I guess. It was true. Without the weight of family expectations, our wedding was becoming exactly what we had originally wanted. Authentic, intimate, meaningful. The fun that had caused so much strife was being used exactly as my grandparents had intended, to give us a beautiful day without financial stress. One evening in late July, about 6 weeks before the wedding, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Aunt Susan standing there with a large, old-fashioned hatbox. Your grandmother wanted you to have this, she said, stepping inside. I've been holding it for years, waiting for the right time. Inside the box was my grandmother's wedding veil, delicate lace yellowed slightly with age. She told me, give this to Janie when she's found someone who truly sees her, Susan explained, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I think now is that time. As I held the fragile lace, I felt a connection to my grandparents that transcended the legal battle over their financial gift. This was their real legacy, not just money, but love that saw and valued me exactly as I was. They would be so proud of the woman you've become, Susan said quietly. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for breaking the cycle. For building a relationship based on mutual respect and love. That night, I cried again, not from hurt or anger this time, but from the bittersweet recognition of what had been lost and what had been gained in these tumultuous months. I had lost the fantasy of a perfect family reconciliation, the dream that my parents would suddenly see and validate me. But I had gained something perhaps more valuable. My own voice, boundaries that protected rather than isolated me, and a deeper understanding of the family I was choosing to build with Michael. The wedding invitations went out the following week. My parents was among them, addressed in my own handwriting, an act of hope, if not yet forgiveness. Our wedding day dawned clear and perfect, September 12th, exactly 6 months after that fateful Easter dinner. The lakeside venue was transformed with wildflowers and twinkling lights, the morning sun casting diamonds across the water's surface as we prepared in separate cabins. Rachel and Michael's sisters helped me into my dress, simple, elegant, entirely me. When they placed my grandmother's restored veil on my head, I felt a circle completing. Something old, something borrowed, something connecting me to a past that valued me. Your grandparents are here today, Rachel whispered, adjusting the delicate lace. They're seeing this. I thought of them, of their gift that had become so much more than money, a catalyst for finding my voice, for standing firm in my worth. The fund had served its purpose, not just financing our celebration, but teaching me what I was capable of defending. The question of who would attend had hovered anxiously in the weeks leading up to the wedding. My parents had RSVP'd yes, but remained distant during our cautious monthly dinners. Myra had not responded at all. I had prepared myself for either outcome, their presence or their absence, determined that neither would define this day. When I stepped out of the cabin toward the ceremony space, the first person I saw was Aunt Susan, beaming with pride. Behind her stood Uncle Dave, Uncle Peter who had flown in from London, and a scattering of cousins who had chosen connection over division. And then, almost unbelievable, my parents. My mother in a conservative blue dress, my father uncomfortable in his suit but present. They stood slightly apart from the other guests, uncertain of their welcome, but there. No Myra. I felt a pang but pushed it aside. Today was about moving forward, not looking back. Michael waited beneath an arch of autumn flowers, his face lighting up as I appeared. The expression in his eyes, love, pride, partnership, was everything. This man had stood beside me through the most difficult months of my life, had seen me at my most vulnerable and my strongest. As I reached him, he squeezed my hands in silent understanding. Our vows were simple, honest, deeply felt. We promised to choose each other daily, to build a home based on mutual respect and equity, to face challenges as a team. Words that might have seemed generic to outsiders, but carried profound meaning for us after what we'd experienced. I promise to see you, really see you, Michael said. To celebrate your strength and support you in your struggles. I promise to stand beside you with an open heart and a straight spine, I replied. To love freely without losing myself. The reception was intimate and joyful, filled with people who genuinely celebrated our union. My parents maintained a careful distance, accepting congratulations, but clearly uncomfortable. I approached them during the cocktail hour, Michael's hand steady in mine. Thank you for coming, I said simply. My mother's eyes welled with uncharacteristic tears. It's a beautiful wedding, Janie. You look beautiful. My father cleared his throat. Your grandparents would have been proud. It wasn't an apology, wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something, a recognition, perhaps, of what this day meant and what their actions had nearly prevented. As dinner concluded and dancing began, I was surprised to see Aunt Susan in deep conversation with my mother in a quiet corner. Their expressions were serious, intent, occasionally nodding. Later, Susan found me by the dessert table. "Your mother has agreed to try family counseling," she said quietly. "With me first, then maybe with you when you're ready. It's a start." Around midnight, as the celebration wound down, I checked my phone and found a text from Myra, sent hours earlier. "Congratulations. The baby kicked today. I think she knows she has an aunt." Not an apology, not a complete olive branch, but like my parents' presence, a small opening, a possibility. The following months brought slow, cautious rebuilding. My parents attended the counseling sessions with Susan, gradually unpacking decades of replicated family patterns. Our monthly dinners became slightly less strained, occasionally even pleasant. My father actually called one day just to check in, a first in our relationship. Myra remained more distant, but the occasional text updates about the pregnancy created a slender thread of connection. When her daughter Sophia was born in January, she sent a photo. After careful consideration, Michael and I sent a small gift and card. Baby steps. 6 months after our wedding, we hosted a small dinner party at our home. Rachel and her new boyfriend, 2 couples from work, and, significantly, my parents. It wasn't perfect. Conversations sometimes lagged, old tensions occasionally surfaced in subtle ways. But as I watched my father actually laughing at something Michael said, as my mother helped me serve dessert in the kitchen, I felt the first real hope that something new and healthier might be possible. "I'm proud of you," my mother said unexpectedly as we arranged cookies on a platter. "For the wedding. For everything." I looked at her, surprised. "Thank you. I'm trying to understand how things went so wrong," she continued haltingly. "Susan has helped me see some things more clearly. It's not easy." "No," I agreed. "It isn't. I can't change the past," she said. "But I'm trying to do better now." It wasn't the sweeping apology part of me still longed for, but I was learning that healing rarely comes in dramatic moments. It arrives in small steps, in quiet efforts, in the daily choice to try again. The wedding fund that had caused such turmoil now seemed almost incidental, a catalyst rather than the core issue. The real inheritance from my grandparents hadn't been the money at all, but the example of valuing each person for who they truly are, of seeing clearly and loving anyway. My relationship with Myra remained the most complex. When Sophia was 3 months old, she finally agreed to meet. We sat awkwardly in a coffee shop, the baby sleeping peacefully in her carrier between us. "She has grandma's eyes," I observed. Myra nodded. "Mom says the same thing." She hesitated. "I'm not ready to talk about everything yet. But I don't want Sophia growing up without knowing her aunt." It was a beginning, fragile but real. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but an acknowledgement that the future didn't have to be defined by the past. The greatest healing, though, came within my marriage and within myself. Michael and I had faced our first major crisis before even exchanging vows and had emerged stronger, more united. The patterns I'd observed in my family had made me hyper-aware of building something different in our relationship: equal partnership, open communication, mutual support. As for me, I discovered parts of myself I hadn't known existed: courage, resilience, the ability to stand firm even when it was painful. The woman who had always given in, always understood, always stepped aside had found her limits and her voice. Rachel put it best during one of our coffee dates. "You know what's amazing? You stood up for yourself when it would have been so much easier not to. That changes everything going forward, not just with your family, but in how you move through the world." She was right. I felt the difference at work, where I now spoke up more confidently in staff meetings. I felt it in new friendships, where I established healthy boundaries from the beginning. I felt it in quiet moments alone, a fundamental shift in how I perceived my own worth. The money served its intended purpose. Our wedding was beautiful, meaningful, debt-free. But the real value was in what the conflict taught me: that I mattered. That my needs and feelings deserved consideration. That standing up for myself wasn't selfish, but necessary. Some family wounds may never fully heal. My parents and I will likely always navigate careful boundaries. Myra and I may never recapture the closeness I once imagined, but we are finding new ways to be family, more honest, more respectful, with clearer expectations and healthier interactions. And I am building my own family now with Michael, based on what we've learned and what we value. A family where no one is the perpetual giver or taker, where needs are expressed and honored, where love doesn't require diminishing yourself. Looking back on that Easter dinner now, I can almost feel grateful for the crisis it precipitated. Without that moment, my mother's smile, the room's applause, my silent shock, I might have continued indefinitely as the accommodating daughter, the understanding sister, the one who always gave way. Instead, I found my voice. I discovered my worth. I drew my line. And in doing so, I changed not just my family dynamic, but my own story. Have you ever had to stand up to family in a difficult situation? What helped you find the courage to draw boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice and standing your ground. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic relationships. Take care of yourself.